So, hello, members of Trilogy. Sarah here, your National Lifestyle Director with Blue Star Resort and Golf. We are welcoming you today to one of our keynote speaker series, which this one I think you're going to find a true delight. So, a couple of years ago, our team, the lifestyle team across the United States, was given a mission to go out and try to find a very inspiring speaker that we could engage that would be topically related to our demographic. And so finally, after at least a year or so, Riley and I have been going back and forth and discussing the book that I happen to have in my hand. And many of you may have a chance to win it if you're in your community, but it's called The 4 Phases of Retirement, What to Expect When You're Retiring. The topic caught my attention because as I was watching the TED Talk that I had seen Riley on, I was like, this goes straight to our demographic. Either people are getting ready for retirement, they're in the early stages of retirement, or like me, I keep looking forward to retirement. So we put a link to that TED Talk in the event description. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it, please do us a favor and take a look there. And just to mention, we're at over 4.2 million views on that, right, Riley?
That is correct. Yes, very gratifying, very gratifying.
Yeah. And then just a reminder to all of our Trilogy communities, we are recording this session. It will be posted a little bit later on MTL, probably by the end of the week, because we're going to go through and do some editing at the very beginning. You can expect today that we should have about 45 minutes or so of content, and then we'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A. But I would always encourage you to go into the chat feature or the Q&A section and start asking your questions there, and we'll start accumulating those. On the other end of the line is Kelsey Cooper, our Associate Director of Marketing, Lifestyle, and Communications here with Blue Star. And because we did have a transition from Teams to Zoom, she is helping those members that may still think that it's on Teams and getting them started. So again, we just wanted to give her a little bit more time to be able to do that. So next up is going to be Riley Moynes to present for today. I'm going to go off screen. But we will certainly be watching and chiming in about 45 minutes later when we get started. So Riley, it's all you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you for the invitation to present some of the work that I have been slaving away at for the last little while. Our topic is, in fact, the 4 phases of retirement, but we're going to look beyond dollars and cents. You see, everyone says that you have to get ready to retire financially. You've got to take care of your investments, and you've got to take care of wills and powers of attorney and estate plans and all of that kind of stuff. And it's critically important. So, of course, you do have to prepare financially. But what they don't tell you is that you also have to get ready psychologically. Who knew? I sure didn't for a long time. But it's important, as I hope you will agree a little bit later on in our session. So let's start with a little bit of background. You are aware, I'm sure, of much of this information, but just to kind of set the stage, baby boomers. That's the group born between 1946 and 1965. And the first of that group hit retirement age of 65 in 2011. At this time, about half of boomers have reached age 65, and the last boomer will turn 65 in about 2030. Today, and tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day, 10,000 North Americans will retire. And this will carry on for the next several years. Think about that, 10,000 retirees a day. I believe that qualifies as a retirement tsunami. 10,000 retirees every single day. Now, at the same time, life expectancy continues to extend. Way back in 1950, which for some of us doesn't seem all that long ago, life expectancy in North America was about 68 years, so that one could anticipate about 3 years of retirement, which may help to account for the couple in the top right-hand corner of the slide here, kind of doddering their way towards their rocking chairs to live out their allotted 3 years. But things, of course, have changed over the last several years, as you can see, and by 2000, average life expectancy had extended to 76 years, so anticipated 11 years of retirement. And in 2010, as you see, 81, 16 years, up to 2021, 82 years, 17 years of retirement. We then had a little blip that you'll notice in 2022. Of course, that was COVID, which did have an impact, as you can imagine. Now, I wanted to be sure about these figures and to be sure about their accuracy. And so I checked with a number of sources, and these figures are provided by statisticians and accountants and actuaries who work with a number of insurance companies and with various departments of government. And on one occasion, I was asked during our session, what's the difference between an actuary and an accountant? You know, they both kind of crunch numbers, and so I wasn't able to answer the question at the time, but I went and dug a little deeper after the session, and the best that I was able to come up with was this. The key difference between an actuary and an accountant, I believe, is that an actuary didn't have quite enough personality to become an accountant. That's the basic difference between the two. Life expectancy, as we've talked about, has continued to expand. And of course, now the fastest growing age group in North America is currently the 85 plus gang. And surprisingly to me, I discovered that the second fastest group is the 100 plus gang. So it's fair to say, I believe, based on the work that I have done and the hundreds of folks that I've spoken to, that many baby boomers can expect to live up to 1/3 of their lives in retirement, which is just astounding compared to 1950 when it was 3 years. So for many people, that's going to be 30 years of retirement. We are clearly an aging society. A couple of years ago, Prudential Insurance Company set up in a park in Austin, Texas. And they put up this big board, and it's about 12 feet high and close to 50 feet long. And as you can see, they marked it off at various points, ages 60 and retirement age 65 and 70 and 80 and 90 and so on. And as people began to kind of wander around and wonder what was going on here in this park, they gave out to people about 400 discs that are kind of like a Frisbee. And they asked people to place those discs on the wall to represent the age of the oldest living person that they know. So look what happened. If we consider, just for the sake of argument here, average life expectancy to be 85, let's say, between the 80 and the 90 there, look where the vast majority of those discs were placed. So it's true, we are going to we should be planning for a longer retirement than we could ever possibly imagine. And so the question becomes, how are we going to spend that perhaps 1/3 of our lives productively and meaningfully? And that's what we want to talk about today. My mom recently reached 100 years of age, and she attributed part of her longevity to what she referred to as her Viking genes. She was born in Denmark, and as I was able to visit her on the date of her 100th birthday, you'll notice the little box in her lap there, and that's a box, not surprisingly perhaps, of Danish pastry, of which she was a big fan. I said to my mom, I've certainly heard of a lot of people who are reaching 100, but I said, you're the first person that I actually know who has arrived at that number. And she kind of thought for a moment, and she looked at me and she said, well, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like. Well, she surpassed 100 and she got on to past 101, and she came close to 102 before she went to her final reward. Let me tell you a story about how I got interested in this topic. Because it's one that was it was personal to me. There's no question about it. I belong to a walking group, and we meet 3 mornings a week at about 7 o'clock in the morning. And our primary goal is to put 10,000 steps on our Fitbits. And then, of course, we go for coffee, and most importantly, we go for cinnamon buns. That's the real attraction, and dragging ourselves out to walk at 7 o'clock in the morning. So we got in the habit of having a topic of discussion each time we walked. And one day the topic for discussion was, how do you squeeze all the juice out of retirement? How's that for 7 o'clock in the morning? So we walked and we talked, and the next day we went on to the next topic, but the question stayed with me because I was technically, I guess, retired at the time. And I was busy enough, but I really didn't get a sense that I was doing anything kind of meaningful or productive. I thought I had a pretty good idea of what retirement looked like in a working career, but when it came to retirement, it was fuzzier for me. So I did what I usually do when I have a question. I went to the original literature. And what I discovered, as we've already mentioned, is that much of the literature surrounding retirement planning is focused on investments and balanced portfolios and estate plans and powers of attorney and wills and all of that stuff that's critically important. It just wasn't what I was looking for. So I decided I need to go another tack, and I began to interview people who had been identified to me as retirees who had kind of figured it out. So I started with that group, and I asked a series of about a dozen questions. I always finished up by asking them, how do you squeeze all the juice out of retirement? This turned into about a 3-year project. And of course, everyone had a referral for me, and, oh, you should talk to so-and-so. They've got it figured out. You should talk to so-and-so. So it went on and on and on. And for about 3 years, I was busy gathering data. And then the job was to try to make sense of it all. So I worked on the material, and I finally was able to kind of mold it in a way that made sense to me and that I hope will make sense for you as well. What I discovered is that there is a framework and a pattern that can help if you know what you're looking for. And that's what I want to share with you today. I want to share that framework that can help make your approach to retirement easier than it might otherwise be. And if you are in retirement, it might help you make some more sense than it perhaps has up until this time. So many of you I know have our little handout there, and I'd ask you to take that if you would at the moment. And on the first page, it's entitled The 99 Game, as you can see. And not surprisingly, on that page are numbers from 1 to 99. And what I'm going to ask you to do in a moment, but not yet, I'm going to ask you to hold on for a second. What I'm going to ask you to do is to find and circle number 1, and then find and circle number 2 and number 3 and 4 and so on, up to 99. And I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that. And the time starts right now. Go. Now, you might have to imagine that you can hear the Jeopardy music in the background as you work on this.
That's my cue. Da
That's your cue.
da 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 da.
Boom, boom, boom. Okay, pens down, as Alec used to say. And what I ask usually when we're doing this as a live presentation, I ask for a show of hands, and I ask everyone to hold their hands up, all who got to 99. No one got to 99. And so I cut it down and say, well, how many hands up, those who got to 50? No, nobody ever gets to 50. 40, no. 30, no. 25, no. And then I'll say, well, you know, the purpose of the exercise is not to cause undue embarrassment. So we're going to stop right there. And allow me to give you a little bit of help that might make a difference here. So I'm going to ask you to now, if you would, divide the page, as you see here, more or less into quarters. And let me provide you with this powerful piece of information. If you haven't discovered it already, number 1 is in the top right-hand quadrant. And number 2 is in the top left-hand quadrant. And number 3 is in the bottom left-hand quadrant. And number 4 is in the bottom right-hand quadrant, and so on. Now, with this newfound and powerful information, I'm going to ask you to pick up where you left off at number 5 or 6 or whatever it was. And let's see how much further we can get in the next 30 seconds. Ready? Go. More Jeopardy music in the background. Okay, pens down once again. And now we'll ask the question with a show of hands. How many got further the second time than you did the first time? And almost everyone in a live presentation raises their hands. Almost everyone got further the second time than the first time. And I'll ask, well, how do you account for that? And you hear such answers as, well, you know, we knew what we were looking for. There was a framework, there was a plan, and all of those things, of course, are absolutely correct. So what I'm hoping to provide you with today is that kind of framework or that plan that can help you to anticipate and make more sense of some of the psychological changes and challenges that almost always accompany retirement. So when we're finished, you're going to know what the 4 phases of retirement are. If you are retired, you'll know which phase you're in. If you're not retired, you'll have a kind of a heads up as to what to expect when that time comes. And if you are retired, you're going to be able to slot your friends and colleagues, and you're going to be able to tell them what phase they're in, and they won't have a clue what you're talking about, but you'll know, and that's the important thing. We're making 2 assumptions when we do our work here. And the first assumption is that we are assuming relatively stable financial health. Second assumption is that we are assuming relatively stable medical health, personal health. I understand entirely that lacking either or both of these situations, that retirement can and does look very, very different. I understand that personally. But with those 2 assumptions, it still is helpful to look at these phases. And that's where we're going to start right now. Phase 1, I call that the vacation phase. It's a period of time that typically lasts between 1 and 2 years, sometimes more, sometimes less. For me, it was just about dead on 2 years. It's a time when, you know, you've worked hard for a long time, and really this is your opportunity. It's all about you for this period of time. And you've probably got a bucket list of things that you have either written down or you've got in your mind of things that you want to accomplish at this time. You've waited all these years and probably couldn't afford to do some of these things, or certainly didn't have the time to do them. And now you probably have both. And so there's a bucket list of activities that tend to predominate at this time. And we hear lots about new golf clubs or golf lessons, pickleball. We're going to improve our pickleball game. There are sports cars. There are new sailboats. All that kind of stuff. There are warm weather properties that are often purchased at this time as part of the vacation phase. It's all about you at this period of time, and that's fine, because as I say, you worked long and hard, and it should be for a period of time all about you. One of the things that we like most in phase one is that, we've had a routine that has dominated our lives, it seems, forever, and now we don't. And we really appreciate having no set routine for at least the time being. For most people, phase one represents their view of an ideal retirement. It's relaxing, it's cavorting along the beach, there's wine involved probably, and it's just freedom. That's the word that people associate, or that they repeat most often when they think of vacation phase one. And certainly traditional advertising has made it appear to people that phase one is the ideal. It's what we've been looking for all of our lives. And it's a wonderful period of time while it lasts. But interestingly enough, what many people have discovered, and certainly I did, is that actually too much of a good thing can be too much. We actually get a bit bored over and over again. People report that they actually, after a while, got bored. And you know what? Although we didn't like our routine when we were forced to abide by it for all those years, and one of the things that we loved about being on vacation is that there was no routine for a period of time. I'm convinced that deep down inside, that genetically we need a routine. And we don't have that right now. So not only are we a bit bored, but we're kind of missing our routine. And we begin to ask ourselves questions like, is that all there is to retirement? I was told this was what it was all about. It was supposed to be perfect. But when we start asking questions like that, we've entered phase two. And in phase two, one gentleman described retirement as a plunge into the abyss of insignificance. Well, maybe a bit over the top, maybe a bit overstated, but those were his exact words. But there is no doubt that retirement is one of life's top 10 traumas. No question about that. It's right up there with death of a spouse, with divorce, with moving, with a new job. It is one of life's top 10 traumas. And we often don't look at retirement that way. And I think we need to, because it really can be a time of some trauma. There's no question about it. Because now that we're in phase two, we're in a tough situation. In phase two, which I call the time when we feel loss and we feel lost, we lose 5 significant, virtually unavoidable losses, and they are all directly related to retirement. We lose our structure. And as I say, in phase one, we didn't mind losing that structure for a while, but deep down, we need a structure. We lose our identity. Males in particular, but certainly not exclusively, identify with the work that they do. And when the work that they have done for whatever period of time is no longer part of their lives, they suffer a loss of identity. Part of them, a part of us, is taken away. We lose relationships. Some of the people that we might have worked with turn into pretty good friends. And when we're no longer working, we kind of lose those relationships. And, and I did this, and you may have too, you can go back after you retire and have coffee with the guys or the gals, but it doesn't take you long to realize that they're still at it and you're not, and that you're kind of a fifth wheel. And if you're like me, you don't go back there all that often. We lose those relationships. We also lose a sense of purpose because many of us get a real sense of purpose. We take what we do seriously. We think we're making a contribution, and we are. And when that is taken away from us, that's a significant loss. And then fifth, some folks acquire a kind of a sense of power. They may, over a period of time, become responsible for personnel or for budget. But when they walk away on that last day, they're just a guy or a gal in the street. Now, we don't see these losses coming, and we lose them all at the same time. And they're all directly related to retirement. It's like, bang! It can be very, very traumatic. And guess what? It gets worse. Because in addition to the 5 significant losses that are directly related to retirement, at this time of our life, these are items not related to retirement particularly, but rather to a time of life. The 3 Ds: depression, decline, divorce. So depression, the world famous Mayo Clinic says that there is a 40% likelihood that when you retire, you will exhibit aspects of clinical depression. 40% likelihood, the Mayo Clinic. Decline, physical decline. That silky smooth golf swing that you used to have might not be so silky smooth anymore. And what about mental decline? Where the heck did I put those keys? Honey, where's the converter? I gave it to you. No, you didn't give it to me. That kind of stuff. And the most shocking thing to me in my research was that in North America, to discover that divorces among people over 50 have doubled. And for those over 65, the rate has tripled since 1990. Incredible. And piled on top of the 5 significant losses directly related to retirement. Do you know what the highest rates of suicide in North America today, where those rates are? Men over 75. Yeah. Phase 2 can be a very, very difficult time. And when we combine the 5 losses associated directly with retirement, plus the 3 Ds here, fella can feel like he's been hit or she's been hit by a bus. But he's got his thumb up, as you can see. It's going to be okay. So it's true, absolutely true, in my experience, that you will experience fear, uncertainty, anxiety in phase 2, and it comes almost as a requirement before we can enjoy some of the much more positive aspects of phases 3 and 4. So to be sure, fear, anxiety, uncertainty, you need to buckle up because it can be a rocky ride. Luckily, however, sooner or later, most of us say to ourselves or perhaps to a significant other, hey, I can't go on like this. I don't want to spend the rest of my life feeling like this. Maybe 30 years of feeling miserable. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. That's a good sign, because that's when the rehab begins. That's when the rehab begins. That's when we begin to ask ourselves questions like, in phase 3, what can I do to make my life productive and meaningful again? When we start asking these questions and when we begin saying to ourselves or to others, I can't go on like this, we've turned the corner. We are now entering phase 3. And we start asking ourselves these questions, as I say, what can I do to make my life meaningful again? How can I contribute? What's going to make me want to get up in the morning again? But it's important to realize that although we may have turned a corner, that phase 3 is one that is described as having both trial and error, success and failure. And I can recount dozens and dozens of interviews of people who had decided or had moved to phase 3 and had tried different things and they failed. Let me share just 3 examples of my experience in phase 3. I decided that part of my recovery, as it were, I was going to provide service if I could, and I served on a condo board for a couple of years. Yes, you smile, you laugh. And I did that until I got tired of being yelled at. Yeah. One year, our board, in its infinite wisdom, decided that on our lovely property, that instead of the traditional daffodils, that we would make a decision and we were going to plant daisies instead, and we got yelled at. Yeah. That worked for a couple of years for me, but it wasn't a long-term solution. I thought about going to law school, and I realized, that's a big bite, and I'm not sure I want to invest that kind of time, all that's involved. And then I thought, well, maybe a paralegal, and that could be interesting. And then I thought, well, I'm not sure I want to spend that much time fighting over speeding tickets in small claims court. But there was an aspect of that training, alternate dispute resolution, that really mediation, that I found very interesting. And I invested a couple of years, about 2.5 years, taking courses, taking programs that I thought were going to set me up as a mediator. It went nowhere, to be perfectly honest, just went nowhere. It was a big disappointment, went nowhere. I love to write. And so I thought, well, maybe when people are retiring, what they might want to do, as I started to do, is to kind of do some memoirs or kind of a family history or kind of a combination of that sort of thing. And I developed a little program called Getting Started on Your Memoirs. And I think it could best be described so far as having attained what we call limited success. Limited success, yeah. So phase 2 and 3 were rocky for me as well. And I did tell you to buckle up. Now, not everyone breaks through to phase 4. Phase 4 is what I call the time when we reinvent and rewire. Some people stay in phase 1. Of all the interviews that I have done, I know of only 2 people who have stayed in phase 1 and who say that they're happy there. I think they're delusional, but that doesn't matter. They think they're happy, and so they are. A number of people cannot get out of phase 2. They have tried and they just simply can't. And unfortunately, those folks become part of the statistics that we just referenced. I know of some folks who have tried to break out of phase 2 into phase 3, and they have tried so many different things, kind of banging their heads against the wall. And I feel so sorry for them because they keep trying, but they're just not successful, and they drift back to phase 2. And that is the most difficult thing to see. Some people move between the phases. I calculate that about 60% of retirees reach phase 4. But those who do are among the happiest people I have ever known. They just cannot wait for the sun to rise. They've got a million things that they want to get done. They're contributing in so many ways, and they're active and they're engaged, and they're just a joy to be around. If we can get to phase 4, which in my view is the goal, that's just wonderful. And I want to try to help you to get there if I possibly can, and if you're not there as yet. Getting to phase 4 is not necessarily very easy, though. Getting to phase 4 requires answering some pretty significant questions. And I've discovered that we are not particularly good at introspection, unless we're encouraged and almost forced to be. We need to ask ourselves tough questions like, what's the mission here? What's my purpose? Why am I here? What's going to make me want to get up in the morning again? How can I squeeze all the juice out of retirement? And these are tough questions. And we, as I say, we try to shy away from them unless we're kind of forced to do so. But I've discovered that there's an underlying theme here, and that's the hint. It almost always involves service to others in one form or another. Almost invariably, phase 4 people are providing service to others in one form or another. Winston Churchill is attributed, or this phrase is attributed to Winston Churchill. He says, "We make a living by what we get, we make a life by what we give." And that's the concept of service that is shared by so many of the phase 4 folks. So I want to offer you some tools, and I want to encourage you that if you don't believe that you're in phase 4 as yet, that you make it your goal to get there. And on the little sheet that you have worked on with the 99 game, we've got some other tools that I hope will be helpful to you. But before we get there, have a look at this bullseye, if you would, or at the target. And I want to point out that at the bottom, on the outside, there is a vast number of things at which I suspect you are completely incompetent. And you may not even care about that. I don't care about being incompetent in a wide range of things. As we move closer to the center, the next one says that there are some things that I do competently and that you do competently, I'm convinced. For example, if required and under pressure, I can deliver a reasonably delicious barbecued hamburger if my sons aren't there to bail me out. I'm competent. I don't love it, but I can do it in a pinch. Closer to the center again, there's a smaller number of things that I do really very well, if I do say so myself, and the same is true for you. And in the middle is what I call unique ability. And I don't mean unique in the sense that no one else on earth has that ability. I mean it in the sense that there are some things, maybe one thing, maybe two or three things that you love to do and that you do superbly well. And that's my situation too. I have a small number of things that I love to do and I do superbly well, in my opinion. And I call that my unique ability. And as we look at the little handout, if you just flip open the page, you'll see tool number 1, unique ability. And so we ask the question, usually in our live workshops, for people to take a little bit of time, and we'll just spend a lesser amount of time here today to give you an opportunity to kind of get started on it, if you're so inclined. But tool number 1, unique ability. And so the answer, at least the questions are, what do you love to do? And what do you do really well? And so there's space on that page for you to do so. And we're just going to take 60 seconds right now. I encourage you to give some more thought to this a little bit later on if you're so inclined, and take it with you and spend some more time, because it can be really helpful. And many people have reported that it is. So let's take 60 seconds and give you a chance to make a list of things that you love to do and things that you know you do really well. Start now. Fifteen seconds left. Okay, let's move on. The second tool I'd like to share with you is what I call high points, and it's on your sheet there as well. What I'm going to ask you to consider, if you would, 5 successes, highlights, breakthroughs, victories, whatever you want to call them. Just 5. You could probably list 50 if you had a couple of minutes, but things that have really been high points for you throughout your life so far. Successes, victories, call them what you will, but just 5 if you would. Just list 5, and we're going to take another 60 seconds or so, starting now. Make a list. Fifteen seconds left. Okay, moving on. Tool number 3, common threads. I'm always interested by the fact that oftentimes in our workshops, people do not see the connection between their unique ability, that is, things that they love to do and do really well, and some of the successes that they have achieved. They don't always make that connection. And I think the connection is so strong. It's logical, it seems to me, that things that you love to do and do really well would probably have led to some success throughout your life. So what I'm going to ask you to do here is to just at the bottom of the page there, have a look at the list that you've created for unique ability and the list that you've created for your 5 victories or successes. And I'm going to ask you if you see a connection between any of them, to physically draw that with a pen or a pencil, because just by doing so kind of reinforces that in our minds. And these are going to be important considerations as we try to get to phase 4. So just take, again, another 60 seconds or so. Look for those connections between unique ability and your successes and physically draw those connections starting now. Go. Okay, moving on again. Now we're going to try to put it all together. And the whole purpose here is to find what you might call your sweet spot. And so we need to take into account what you love to do at 12 o'clock there, and at 9 o'clock, what you're good at. That's kind of the combination, right, of unique abilities. Then we're going to look at over at 3 o'clock at past successes. We need to take that into account as well. And at 6 o'clock, we often don't think about this, but what can you be paid for? And I don't necessarily mean financially, I mean maybe psychically. What is it that you do that makes you feel really good? And there are a whole range of things. In many cases, in phase 4, it's providing service to others. But what I'm going to suggest is that at the point where those 4 circles kind of intersect or overlap, that's what I want to call your sweet spot. And that's where you want to spend as much time as you possibly can in retirement, because it's things that you love to do really well, have led to success in the past, and make you feel good. What could be better than that? Than putting together activities that make you feel good and know that you're building on your strengths. That's what people in phase 4 do over and over and over again. Interesting study done a couple of years ago by Harvard Business School. This was a 20-year longitudinal study where they interviewed over 15,000 retirees. And they went back to these folks every 5 years over that 20-year period. And they asked them different questions, of course, as they progressed through their years. And the result was a biblical size study from Harvard Business School. But one of the critical quotes that stands out for me, and I hope might stand out for you, is the one that you see: the unhappiest retirees of all had not gone on to do anything productive beyond pleasing themselves. The unhappiest retirees of all had not gone on to do anything productive beyond pleasing themselves. Now, that is phase one behavior. And it's fine for a while. It's fine for a couple of years, but you cannot build a successful 30-year retirement on doing nothing beyond pleasing themselves. You simply cannot do it. I think you'd agree that most of us need to find activities, want to find activities that we find meaningful and that give us a real sense of purpose. And as Steve Jobs described it a few years ago, to put our own little dent in the universe. And although our dent is likely to be less noticeable than Steve's, we can still put our own little dent in the universe. So maybe for you, it's supporting a charity, or I've spoken to people who get great satisfaction. One fellow in particular, he works on Friday afternoons from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. And he delivers hot, delicious pizzas to people who have ordered it. He gets there, he gets great satisfaction out of delivering something that they're looking forward to. He earns great tips, although that's not his primary purpose, but it just makes him feel good to deliver pizzas, for example. It's pretty basic, but it gives him great joy. And that's one of the activities that he's involved with. Maybe you could mentor students, or maybe you just want to be the very best grandparent that you can be, and that's just great as well. Or maybe you want to write a book or your memoirs. Service to others, things that make you want to get up in the morning and that combine your skills, abilities, and past successes to make it really successful. Or maybe this is a possibility. This is my friend Tim Burrows is his name. I call him Tim Tesla. He's owned 3 Tesla vehicles so far, and he has put together a little program, and he delivers it to Rotary clubs and to church groups and to, in this case, children's groups. And he does a little bit of an hour presentation about electric vehicle technology, and many people are surprised to learn that it's been around for well over 100 years. Here he is in the schoolyard, and of course, even these little kids know darn well that when you lift up the hood of a vehicle, there's supposed to be a motor there. But of course, there isn't in a Tesla, and they're all astounded at this. Or here's another possibility. I think maybe this might be of more appeal to some of you. Maybe you'd like to be an old coot giving advice. Yeah, this is a true story. This is about a group in Salt Lake City, Utah. And they used to meet. Now, you don't see all of the old coots here. There's only just a few of them here. There's a larger number, about a dozen of them. But they used to meet in the deli owned by the gentleman at the front left there with the straw hat on. And they used to meet there on Saturday mornings, and they would drink coffee and eat bagels and solve many of the world's problems over a couple of hour period. And then one day, the fellow in the red, he said, to the group, he said, amongst our group, there is a tremendous depth and breadth of expertise and experience, and we owe it to the world to share that with the world. And so he said, we're going to set up a booth in the farmer's market, and we're going to give advice. It'll be free advice, probably bad, but it's going to be free. So here they are, at least a group of them. The fellow to the left of the deli owner in the white t-shirt, he owns a kitchen cabinet making business. The lady at the back is a journalist for the local newspaper. The fellow in the red t-shirt was a former teacher, and he's the one who got it all started. Now, you might have noticed the gentleman at the back there in the black with the glasses on, with sunglasses on. He is not an old coot. He is an old coot in training, hoping that when he reaches the magic age of 65, he might have acquired enough experience and expertise to be considered one of the old coots. So there they are in the market. They had a slow start, as they would be the first to admit. One of the first questions asked was posed by about a 10-year-old kid who wanted help with his math homework. And he had his tablet with him, which caused a problem for some of the coots, but they did the best they could. Then there was a lady who wanted advice as to how she could prevent her cat from peeing on her living room rug. So they started slowly, but things have picked up. And according to the fellow in the red, they are now the most popular group, the most popular booth at the farmers market. And that is evidenced by the fact that they now, are you ready for this? They now have their own weekly podcast, Old Coots Giving Advice, available on all of the podcast platforms. I had an opportunity a couple of years ago. This is not a regular kind of a thing. It was a one-time so far opportunity, although I hope to do it again. This was before COVID. And I was part of a group, a water group that visited Honduras. And our mission for a 5-day period was to repair 8 wells, not to drill, but to repair 8 wells. These wells had been drilled in the 1980s by the Japanese government as a humanitarian gesture, and they worked for a while until they didn't. And there was no call this number to have it repaired kind of thing. They just fell into disuse. And so we had a gentleman on the ground who had identified these for us. And during that 1-week period, we were lucky enough to be able to repair 7 of the 8 wells. The 8th one simply required equipment more than we could handle. When all goes well, these things can be repaired within about 4 hours. And in this situation, I'm busy sterilizing the plastic pipes that are going to go into the ground when my colleagues take out the rusted old pipes that have been there for a number of years. We were lucky enough, and it was such a gratifying experience. We were lucky enough to be able to provide clean drinking water for over 2,200 people in those little villages that we visited during that weekend, and to provide hygiene training to 300 moms and kids. It was a most gratifying experience. At the end of the 4-hour period, everybody is happy, as you can see, and we've got our new pump. And in many cases, these kids had been in a situation before where they had clean drinking water delivered to their village. They would have to walk, in some cases, miles to get water and bring it back. And it was always the young girls and the women who did so, and they were subject to to bad things happening en route. A wonderful experience. Something that there's a great need for. I'm involved with a water group here in Canada, but it's interesting for me, and I always want to repeat this, that contaminated water is the world's biggest cause of death and disease, and it's the easiest to fix. All it takes is clean drinking water. So as I say, that was a trip that I don't imagine happens every day for sure, but I hope it'll happen for me again. But every Friday I show up at our local hospital, and I'm part of what is called the Welcome Committee. And our job is to identify people coming through the door of the hospital. And we've been reminded that no one comes to the hospital for the fun of it. And so many of these people are under duress, under stress. They're not sure where they're going. It's a big new hospital. And so our job is to not give directions, but where possible, to take people to the right part of the building, of the hospital that they're supposed to be going to. And it's a greatly satisfying experience for me. I put about 10,000 steps on my Fitbit that day. But it's just a great feeling to be able to see the gratitude that these people express when they're under duress and they get some help. It's a wonderful experience. Rick Warren, interestingly enough, well-known pastor and author, who says that the only really happy people are those who have learned how to serve. And that has certainly been my experience in examining the 4 phases. So remember, in this transition, you are not alone. There are 10,000 North Americans retiring every day. We have more options to consider and probably longer to carry them out than ever before. And we have a huge opportunity to combine our passions and things that we love to do. And this leads me to my final story that I'd like to share with you. This is my friend Bill. He is a neighbor of ours in our Florida community. Bill spent 40 years inflicting pain. He was a dentist, but you can tell by his image there that he's not a pain-inflicting kind of guy at all. But Bill had this idea that in our community, which is primarily a golf community, that there was lots of expertise and experience, and he believed that if you ask people to share with others their skills and abilities, teach them how to do other things, they would, in fact, respond positively. And that's what he did. And in the first year, we had 9 programs. People taught art and bridge and mahjong. And Bill is an iPhone and an iPad guy. And we provided programs for, in the first year, 9 programs, 200 people showed up. The next year, that blossomed to 45 programs with over 700 participants. And in the third year, over 90 programs and 2,100 registrants. It just shows the power that one person can have in phase 4 when you're providing service to others. And then you remember in phase 2, we talked about the 5 losses that people incurred. Well, interestingly enough for Bill, in phase 4, all 5 of these losses have been regained and they've been enhanced because he has a new structure for his life, a new identity. He's no longer the pain-inflicting dentist. He's the guy that gets things done. He's created new relationships in our community, has a renewed sense of purpose to make our community the best that it can be. And although Bill couldn't care less about power, he has made a powerful difference in our community. So you now know what the 4 phases of retirement are. If you're retired, you know which phase you're in. If you're not, you have a heads up as to what to expect when that time comes. So final advice, don't retire, at least in the traditional sense. But what I'm encouraging you to consider is rewiring. Take the things that you love to do, that you know you do really well, and that have led to success in the past, and perhaps apply them in a new situation that has never been open to you before. It's a wonderful feeling of freedom and exhilaration, and providing service is just a wonderful way to go. So everyone says you have to get ready to retire financially, and of course you do. What they don't tell you is that you have to get ready psychologically. And I hope that our session today, by providing the 4 phases, can help you get ready to prepare psychologically. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my research. Sarah, back to you.
Absolutely. So we have some questions here for you if you have a few more minutes to spend with us.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
Okay, so let's start. Anonymous wrote in, your mom looked great at 100. What were her secrets to success in retirement?
Well, she would say basically her Viking genes is what kept her going and kept her relatively young. She was not a particularly social person, but she enjoyed her artwork, that's for sure. And she just kept on doing it as long as she could.
That's great. I agree with that. And then I have another question here from Anne, who says, in your opinion, what's the attraction of pickleball? What needs get filled in learning and mastering this game?
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
frustration.
Maybe frustration. You know, it's in my experience, I play mostly doubles, and that makes it a little bit easier. It's not quite as hard on the body. You're not looking necessarily at balls being driven at you at the same speed that they sometimes are on the tennis court. and it's just a little bit smaller, easier to move around. It's easier to get some exercise. It's a very social game. And it's the only thing wrong with it is that crummy name, pickleball. I have no idea. Well, I do know where it came from, but it just they could do better on that.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. So we did have a question that came in a few minutes ago about examples of what has fulfilled retirees in phase 4. And I think you actually answered some of those things with the old coots and
Yeah,
some
yeah.
of those things. And your volunteering efforts, they all seem to really, again, what brings you joy where you can give back and feel fulfilled. So
Yeah. And use your skills, your abilities, things you love to do, and that have led to success in the past. Yeah, it's that combination that I find most appealing and most attractive.
great. And then I have another question here from Albert who asked, what were the reasons that you failed or stopped trying to find a sense of purpose?
I don't think I did stop finding a sense of purpose. I had some false starts in phase 3, that's for sure, as I outlined. But you know, it really, for me, it was a matter of going back to my strengths. What are the things I love to do? What are the things I do really well? And my background was in teaching, and I enjoyed teaching, and I was, I think, a good teacher. And so I kind of repackaged and reused some of those skills and abilities, I think, in a slightly different way, and hopefully providing a valuable service to folks who are struggling with some of the psychological changes and challenges that almost always accompany retirement.
Sounds good. And we have time for one last question from Kathy. She says, I see new retirees not only having retirement about themselves, but also taking classes and being of service. Did you meet any people like that in your research?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, indeed. Lots of course taking, in many cases, you know, skills that they kind of had never had an opportunity to participate in, sports, card games in particular. There are lots of online courses that universities are offering to really appeal to this demographic. And certainly, I've only kind of touched the surface on the wide range of things that are out there and available. And I just encourage people to think about what are your strengths, what do you love to do, what's led to success in the past, and look for opportunities to apply those, and you will most definitely find them.
Absolutely. I know that this has been very, very meaningful for me, and I hope for many of our membership as well across the United States. I know that we did run into a little bit of confusion with the Teams link that we had originally set up, and we switched it to Zoom. And so we had some folks that didn't quite get in at the very beginning of the presentation. So just a reminder that the recording will be posted for you on MTL. Several of you have already emailed me personally, and once I get that recording, I'll send those to you directly, as well as those at home did not have an opportunity to get the handouts. So those will be posted as well with the recording. And again, I've had Brian and a couple of people email me directly, so I'll get those out to you right after this presentation. But Riley, it's been great. Thank you very, very much. And members, one of the things that I'd like to chat with you a little bit about here is we're going to be setting up a secondary keynote speaker series next year in 2025, where we ask some of our members to give back to the other members across the United States and their own kind of member spotlight series. So one of the ways that we're going to be trying to fulfill some of these things for our members who, again, many of them in our communities are retired. And you asked me that question today, Riley, and many of us are still not retired. So we've got to look for what we can do to fulfill that need, because we have such interesting, dynamic people that live in our communities, and we want them to share their passions as well. So again, members, thanks for joining us today. Riley, it's been great getting to know you. I'll stay in touch, not to worry.
Okay, Sarah, thanks so much. And thanks everyone for participating.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.